Welcome back to OTR. It's time now for our roundtable discussion. And joining us this morning, Democratic analyst Marianne Marsh, Republican analyst Ginny Buckingham. It's great to see you guys. Let's start with the sanctuary city battle in Boston. The ICE director vowed to flood the zone, flood Boston, after Mayor Wu refused to strip sanctuary protections. We just spoke with the Boston City Council president about that. So, Ginny, let me start with you. Is Mayor Wu using the right strategy, employing the right strategy right now?
Politically, yes, no question. It's good politically for her to take on President Trump. It's good for President Trump to be able to take on the mayor of Boston. Who it's probably not good for are the residents of Boston, including immigrants who don't need to have criminal immigrants in their midst that are not being removed. And they don't need the federal government focused like a laser. Think about who wasn't at that press conference. The governor.
The governor.
She was not there, and I think that was for a reason.
Marianne?
Michelle was following the law, which she should. Donald Trump is not. And the Sanctuary Boston Trust Act, the local police in Boston will help if it's a criminal matter. If it's not a criminal matter, they're not involved in it. So instead, what you see now is Trump is going to bully his way to Boston, try to get them to change the law, bring troops here in a campaign of fear and loathing, and disrupt everything. And that is the predicate for martial law. He's already done it in Washington. He's done it in LA. They're coming to Massachusetts. Acting Director Vice Lyons is from Boston, and I expect people in Boston will turn out in droves to stand up against them, and they should, because no one wants to lose their democracy, and this is how it's done.
So, Marianne, sticking with the troops, obviously they have been mobilized in Washington, D.C. This Thursday, the president visited the troops. He brought them burgers and pizza. He was going to go on a tour with them, but that didn't happen. The idea that he could go to other cities, could come to Boston. Ginny, do you think that will happen?
No, I don't, but I think that going to cities where it's necessary, like a Baltimore or an Oakland, California, might be
the troops are at national monuments and at
but there are also other places.
They're not really in the areas of the city where
that's actually not true, and I think people really need to look beyond the headlines, which are not telling the full story, which is they're in Ward 7, they're in Ward 8 in Washington, D.C. In fact, half of the non-immigration arrests that they've made have been in those most crime-ridden wards in D.C. I would think the people who live there, who are being attacked by criminals, would welcome them, and I think they probably are.
Marianne.
Here's what martial law is like. First of all, Donald Trump personally gave us the list of cities he's going to. And he's coming to Boston, which does not have a crime problem like so many other cities, all right? Lowest crime rate in the country, lowest murder rate in the country. Yet he's trying to make an example of everybody to impose martial law. So I want everyone to understand what martial law is. You lose your rights. The military takes over the government. They suspend the judiciary. You lose civil rights like the right to assemble, the right to freedom of speech. And you rarely get it back when that happens. That is a dictatorship. That is not a democracy. That is what Donald Trump wants.
And that is not what is happening here. This is about law enforcement. It's about backing up law enforcement and helping regular citizens who are law-abiding live their lives peacefully. That's what this is about.
You're using the military against American people, okay? And now, as we discussed in the green room, they're going to give them guns. They're not trained for law enforcement. That's not what the military's for, and the military is never to be used against people who live in this country. And yet here we are.
Can I follow up? When the mayors of these cities say this is not needed, why do you think it's needed?
Because when you have 2 3-year-olds back to back sitting in cars in Washington, D.C. and getting killed by drive-by shooters, it's needed. When you have a 21-year-old UMass intern going out to a bar at 10 o'clock at night and shot and killed, it's needed. That is why the facts are the facts. It's not, the crime rate's going up or down. It's real people that are getting killed here.
Donald Trump cut $1 billion from the D.C. budget, which the mayor there, Bowser, wanted to use in part to hire more police officers. That's how you do it.
Even Mayor Bowser said more police is better, and she welcomes the fact that
and
there's more police.
He cut the money.
Next item involves the president. President Trump is pushing for a meeting between Russia's Vladimir Putin and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. That was the main takeaway after a White House summit involving Zelensky and European leaders. Trump met with Putin days earlier. As you know, Marianne, let's see, is the president going out on a limb to try to make this happen?
Trump will only do what Putin allows him to do. And Putin has no interest in a discussion at this point. He thinks the longer he can go, the more likely he is to get the deal he wants. And you saw that with Trump, besides rolling out the red carpet and all that. Putin bombed an American factory in Ukraine after all of those meetings. So this is really Putin's party, and you've seen Trump change his positions after he talks to Trump. He left the heads of the European countries who came to support Zelensky to call Putin to tell him how the meeting was going, probably because that was the time Putin told him to call. And thankfully, we have European heads of state who are defending democracy, but Donald Trump is decidedly on Vladimir Putin's side.
Ginny.
If Zelensky goes to the table with Putin, it's a huge victory for democracy because Putin does not see him as an equal. If Donald Trump makes that happen, that's a really good thing to find peace.
We continue on the record. Stay with us.